Welcome to Net Zero. I'm Michele Whiting. Today's youth need to be prepared to make the necessary choices to safeguard our planet. Dr. Tina Grotzer, a cognitive scientist at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, explores the notion of complex causality and how our understanding of causality in the context of climate change affects our decision-making. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Grotzer to Net Zero. Dr. Grotzer, welcome. Human beings learn in different ways. Why do some people have a harder time focusing on and addressing what we need to do to solve the climate crisis? And how is your research helping to improve upon this problem?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with all of you. It's really a pleasure. I would say that many of the problems that we have reasoning about issues related to climate change are actually difficult for everyone. They're inherent to our cognitive architecture. So those who are most successful in thinking in sensitive ways about the climate and thinking about sustainability are people who step back, reflect on their decisions, hold those, and make decisions that affect their life choices in the broader sense. So the research that I do looks at how young people reason about these various forms of complexity. We actually look at some of the youngest kids, and we see more affordances than you would realize. So when we study these forms of knowledge and these affordances, we can help kids develop more sophisticated understandings about those as they learn to think about the climate, and then to make those one-off reflective decisions kind of change the way that you behave every day.
You meet young people from all over the world at Harvard. What are some of your observations on how the world's different countries are approaching the net zero challenge? And what new ideas and/or solutions have you seen students present to their international peers?
I would say that my students recognize multiple perspectives on the problem space and also multiple ways of knowing. So they understand that it takes all of us. They also understand the power of their distributed grassroots efforts for emergent outcomes. And that's a really important and powerful understanding because it leaves you in a place of hope and promise, even when world leaders aren't doing the things you might want them to do. They also recognize the urgency of climate change, and they recognize the power of innovation. Their acute awareness of the environmental injustice, and they are very thoughtful about bringing unrepresented voices to the table. We used to play a game called Moral Musical Chairs. I play this game with students of all different ages now. The difference is I ask them, whose voices are not at the table? What chairs do we need to have that we're not including before we play the game, so that they can really think about those voices that are missing and create a space for them?
How do you recommend we educate today's learners to adapt to a world in which they will have to live with the consequences of the climate crisis? How do you give them the skills they'll need to solve the difficult problems they're going to face?
I think the other really big and important shift that educators need to adopt is this idea of being an Earthling first. Being an Earthling first really puts at the center the quest that is in front of all of us.
Schools and communities need to do more to help youth chart careers that are green, sustainable, and flexible. What are your views on how this might be accomplished?
So I think that kids do need to understand the science. Now, you don't have to understand all the science to act in ways that are positive, but you do need to understand enough of the science to be able to figure out what those are. And sometimes that means getting out of the box. We can teach kids to be more creative thinkers. We know this. We can help today's students become better learners, thinkers, citizens by helping them envision and innovate.
Your Next Level Lab brings together expertise from many different disciplines to help learners address urgent issues in workforce development, among other things. Can you speak about the goals of this new program and what you've learned from your students so far?
We recently launched the Next Level Lab with funding from Accenture Corporate Giving. And the idea is to enable new visions for what's possible in developing human potential. So what we do is we apply and contribute to the research in neuroscience, cognitive science, and the learning sciences. We view learners as embodied, cognitive, emotional, and social beings. We view them as situated in complex contexts. So less teaching in, sort of pull them out, teach them something, and then tell them to go apply it. more focus on how do you adjust the context around you to be able to do your best work. We view our mission as one of inviting conversation. So we've invited various people in the field. We've been reaching out and publishing. And we have a lot of graduate students involved in our work. The graduate students who come into the lab in the past 2 years have contributed a lot, and they're really interested in knowing how they can use this towards both a sustainable future for vulnerable populations, but also towards the goals of sustainability for the planet.
Can you talk about the inspiration for the Ecomove project and what you learned while developing the curriculum?
So Ecomove was an earlier version of our later EcoXPT program, is a virtual world in which students explore. In their exploration, they start to notice some things that are puzzling. Once students are in the world, they start to gather data, figure out what's going on. It helps them to learn some things about how they deal with complexity.
Do you have any other messages or takeaways for our net zero audience, either on your research or the race to net zero?
Well, I think the most important thing is the action that people engage in, because that's what gives us hope. We need to witness the changes that are already happening. Witnessing those changes and realizing that we need to move is the idea that we really need to envision these new possibilities, start to think differently about our world. We need hope to sustain us, and we need to bring all of us together in this hopeful endeavor, but in starting a new way of being in our world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grotzer, for sharing your research and your insights with us today on Net Zero. I'm Michele Whiting. I add my voice to the voices of my Net Zero International youth peers to monitor the actions of our world's leaders to achieve their net zero commitments.